Yeah, welcome everyone. It's gone 2 o'clock, so we'll open the afternoon session of the Development Management Committee for the 13th of April 2022. Just quickly, because we've got a whole new people in here, just a few housekeeping things. There is no fire practice arranged, so if it goes off, the fire alarm goes, you go through the doors at the back, make your way into the car park. Toilets are through that door on your left, water's through that door on your right, although I did see there weren't any glasses there. But that's it. And then this meeting is being live streamed. So to members, remember to put your mics on, as I forgot. The gentleman in the far corner there is also filming the meeting, just so you're aware. So all angles are covered, looks like to me. What I'll do is we'll just introduce ourselves on the top table. We'll do that in a second. As far as the applications are concerned, both of these are major applications, so any speakers that are down will have 5 minutes. The officer will make the presentation. There's the objectors, supporters, parish council, ward members. After each of those has spoken, members of the committee may want to ask questions for clarification, and then we'll move into the debate and come to a decision. Can I just say, it's great to see so many members of the public here, but if you could try and refrain from shouting out or getting involved, it's only the speakers that are down on the list that are able to speak during this meeting. That's the policy, and we're not going to change that. Right, so without further ado, introduce ourselves.
I am Janice Young. I am the Democratic Services Officer and the clerk for this committee.
Yeah, sorry, I should have done it before. My name is Julian Brazil, and I'm chairman of the Development Management Committee.
Afternoon, I'm Councillor Richard Foss, and I'm vice chair of this committee.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm David Fairbairn. I'm head of legal services and monitoring officer and legal advisor to the committee today.
Good afternoon, my name is Jacqueline Houselander. I'm a senior specialist in the planning department, standing in for the head of planning today at this meeting.
And I'm Bryn Kitching. I'm the planning officer for the next 2 applications, the Broome Park application and the Sawmills application.
Right, I think that's covered all the housekeeping things, in which case we'll move back into the agenda, and it's agenda item 6E, which is treble 42/21. And that is a reserved matters application for Broome Park, land at Broome Park. Mr. Kitchen, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so this is the reserved matters application seeking approval for the appearance, landscaping, layout and scale for 80 dwellings at Broome Park. So about this time last year, members of the committee considered the outline application and resolved to grant permission grant outline permission for 80 dwellings subject to 106. That 106 was completed in October last year, and the outline planning permission was issued. The reserved matters on that were, as I say, the appearance, landscaping, layout and scale, and that's what we're being asked to consider today. So, starting with Broome Park, we have the red line application of the site here hatched on the plan. There is additional land, sort of blue land, which is around the edges of this, and I'll come on to that in a minute, which form the dark corridors and some of the open space, as well as the woodland to the south of this, south of the red line, but north of the Bidwell Brook. An aerial photograph of the field. This is taken from Google Images. So the application site being within the area of sort of cut grass and that woodland I mentioned before here, and the Bidwell Brook here. And I'll just take you back to the parameter plan that was approved as part of the outline planning permission. So at the outline stage, we knew about the about the Greater Horseshoe Bats and the requirement for dark corridors. And that set out a requirement to have a 20-metre wide dark corridor around the northern edge of the site and a 10-metre wide dark corridor around the southern edge of the site. So that's in the green. The parameter plan also sets some of the density. So it talked about on the lower land in the darker orange being up the greater density, whereas the lower densities on the site would be in the sort of yellow land here and here. Access was approved at the outline stage, so a new vehicle access into the site from the main road, so halfway point between the cemetery here and the school here. So that access point involving a right turn lane and cycle pedestrian access was approved as part of the outline. And now just moving on to some slides to show you some of the site context. So we've got a sloping site, and those from the members' site visit will be well aware of this in terms of the access comes in here on generally flat land, and it dips down quite sharply because this land's slightly made up, or I think from a previous temporary use of homing the school a few years ago while building works was taking place. So slightly made up land here, drops down, then rises up, with the highest points being around Broome Park, the housing development at Broome Park itself. Land sloping down towards the Bidwell Brook. For context, this sort of orange dotted line is the line of the overhead power lines, and the blue line here is the extent of the functional floodplain. So the site is outside of that. The proposed layout involves, as I say, main access coming into the site with a terrace of dwellings to the south of that, allotments to the north, and then a main spine road running straight through in a straight line, sort of terminating view with an oak tree here, and then we have another sort of main route sort of running in this sort of diagonal section, so trying to draw a line between the views between Yarna Beacon and the tower of St Mary's Church. So a sort of straight line through there, and then a sort of U-shaped road coming off that, going down to the proposed play area and attenuation basin. This probably shows it in an easier way to understand in terms of less lines on there. But so this is the same layout. You can see around the edges we have these dark corridors which are separated from the development by a 1.4 metre high bank with planting on top. That is to keep these areas dark as required by the Habitats Regulations assessment carried out at the outline stage. Those areas must be kept at less than 0.5 lux. And I'll show you some plans of that in a moment. Two main areas of public open space. The one to the south I mentioned before, involving the children's play area and attenuation basin, and a second area here within the centre of the site, an orchard here with a sort of lane running through. So we have a slightly different highway approach here, where we, rather than the standard highway design straight through, we have a much narrower sort of feel of that with a lane, and then to the south of that, open space, including a rain garden, which is an attenuation feature for surface water. Just get a feel for heights on the site. Yellow being 2-storey houses, red being 1.5 storey. So that's accommodation within the roof, and anything in the blue would be single storey, a house or garage. So as you can see, on the lower parts of the site, generally 2-storey housing. On this higher part of the site here, 1.5 storey, and then a mix of 1 storey, 1.5, and 2 storey on the western part of the site. This is just a plan from the parking strategy, just showing where which blocks have on-plot parking, garage parking, and courtyard parking. This plan also shows the position of electric vehicle charging points, which are on every dwelling which has on-site parking has its own EV charging points. In areas of communal parking, there are shared charging points. So, for instance, in this area here, there are 4 charging points for those parking spaces there. And just some views to try to get a feel for the slopes really involved. So this is a view sort of sat from above the school. So we have the entrance here with the allotments and then cemetery beyond. So these are the higher parts of the site here and here, and then dropping down to the lower parts of the site here. So just to give you an idea on levels, and I have another one of these looking from the other direction. So this is sitting above Broome Park itself, looking towards the school. So the entrance point is here with the allotments, that entrance, that terrace, and you can see that sort of long street running through the middle of the development there. That's the orchard area of open space I mentioned with the rain garden next to it. And then one from above the Attenuation Pond looking back up the development. So this is the Attenuation Pond children's play area. In the distance you can see the terrace there, and that's where the access to the site is. So we've got a site running upwards there. And this is the view of the proposed 1.5 stories around Hazel Park. So this is in the northern part of the site. The existing development at Broome Park's here. The orchard area here. The existing bungalow on the site. For members on the site visit, we entered the gate next to an existing bungalow. That's here. And obviously you can see the dark corridor, 20-metre buffer all the way around the site there. So a mix of house types from one bed through to 4-bed housing on the site. Some of this is in terraces and semi-detached at the entrance and on the lower parts of the site. So those tend to be the smaller 2-storey houses, as in 1 and 2 and 3-bed properties, and then generally larger properties on the upper slopes, which go in a mix of 1-storey, 1.5-storey and 2-storey. Position of the affordable housing. So the outline secured the full policy complement of affordable housing of 24 units. These are located in 2 areas. So one at the entrance overlooking the allotments, and secondly in the lower part of the site overlooking the children's play area and public open space, Attenuation Pond here. On the site visit, members were asking questions about the relationship in heights of dwellings as in relation to Broome Park itself, the existing dwellings at Broome Park. Here's a section through the 3 dwellings on the far west of the site, so plots 57 to 59 here, and through to the existing dwelling on Broome Park. So on the section, existing 2-storey dwelling on Broome Park, and then the heights of those properties coming down. The red line being the existing ground level. So these ones are dug down slightly below existing ground level, but in terms of ridge heights, you can see that they're lower than the properties at Broome Park. Moving across a little bit through the bungalows at Broome Park. This is the bungalow on Broome Park development itself, and then again running through the heights of the dwellings, which are a mix of 1.5 and 2-storey here, and again those ridge lines being kept down below the height of the bungalow, and again the red line being the existing ground level. A long section now running sort of north through to south. So we have up here we have the just behind the bungalow of Hazel Park, and again just to see the red line being the existing ground level. So you can see there's a combination of cut and a little bit of fill as we run through that line. So this one extends to the lower drawing through the public open space, children's play area, down to the attenuation pond at that point there. And a couple more street scene photos. So one looking down the route runs north-south down towards the children's play. So the property's stepping down as we go down the slope. And this street elevation is so almost if you were stood in the orchard looking sort of in southeasterly direction, this is the street scene proposed. On that main access route coming in, so we have another section. So again, this is looking south. So this is the main road here. Then we have that 30-metre offset before we hit the start at the terrace of dwellings going across, and then pairs of semis. Important to note here is the red line. So the red line is existing ground level. So where there's a little bit of cut at this stage, there becomes quite a bit of fill here. And that is in that dip when we were on the site, where we could see there was a clear dip, and I mentioned that needed to be brought up. So that is how the road deals with that area there. So some of the cut from elsewhere on the site becomes fill on this part of the site. I've got this plan up. This is the bin storage strategy, which I was asked to bring forward as a plan for committee from the site visit. I'm just going to zoom in because if I can, because I appreciate you might not even now, but this showing the locations of bins and the routes they need to take to either go to a bin muster point or to take them out to roadside, curbside collection. So across the site, we have locations of all the bin storage points there. This is the plan which will show the proposed materials. So we've got a mix of stone, we've got a mix of predominantly render. There is some dark timber cladding, dark stained timber cladding on the site as well. So predominantly a render development with some timber cladding and some natural stone. I have this in case any members have any particular questions about particular properties, but I don't intend to go through each house type and go through that at this stage. And a plan just showing the adoptable highway. So what is proposed to be adopted as main road. We have a cutout here showing the access in along the terrace and the table, and then that rejoins the main part here. And what I want to point out in this one is that it proposes so an off-highway pedestrian cycle route. So joining in with existing Sustrans route here on the main road, that turns the corner. So we have an off-highway shared pedestrian cycle route which goes along the side of the road, and at this point it deviates from the road and goes through the open space fronting onto the dwellings here with the rain garden to the north, and that allows us to have a much narrower sort of lane linking these two areas to give a break between the different sort of character areas within the proposed development. Which then brings us on to the drainage for that for the site. So areas shown in pink on this plan, that is to be dealt with by soakaway. So house types with pink, so they are to drain to the soakaways, which are shown in blue here. And the parking areas here are permeable parking areas as well, so that is effectively soakaway as well. So they're the areas which go to soakaway. The roads and then the other dwellings are then through a drainage strategy of, we have the rain garden here at this point, and then we have the attenuation basin here. So other surface water which falls on these properties and these hard surfaces would be piped down to the attenuation basin where it is stored, attenuated, and then released into the Bidwell Brook at a controlled rate to mimic greenfield runoff rates. Part of that drainage strategy plan here, we'll just zoom in. So things like, purple is buildings which go to the attenuation basin, the blue is driveways to the attenuation basin as well, and the roads to the attenuation basin. And then the darker blue and the green is to soak away on the site. The attenuation basin in the southern part of the site is shown here with the blue lozenge. This is overlaid onto the tree protection plan, or the tree protection plan is overlaid onto the attenuation basin plan. And the areas in red here, those are the trees which would need to be removed in order to construct that attenuation basin there. So they're the areas of trees and woodland we saw on site which would need to be removed. This straight line running through, that's the line of the existing power lines, and underneath those there aren't any trees at the moment because of keeping them clear for a power line running over the top. As part of this, it shows the walkways in the open space around the attenuation basin and the woodland walk proposed within the areas of retained woodland, which are subject to the woodland management plan secured as part of the outline consent. Attenuation basin, we have some cross sections through to show how that would work. So sort of children's play area here, then footway around, and then dropping down to the attenuation basin with the lip coming up. And then you can see how that's cut into the existing land. And then we have the cross section through the attenuation basin in the other direction, the sort of east-west direction there. This plan shows is a combination plan of the hard and soft landscaping proposed. So this shows the location of that children's play area there, attenuation basin, that dark corridor all the way round the orchard here and rain garden. And surrounding the development, so when I mentioned earlier there'd be a Devon bank and with hedgerow planting on top all around this area to create the dark corridor. These are the details of that. So we have 1.4 metre high banks with planting on top. In some places these have to be stepped where we have a change in levels. So there's the example of that. And then facing onto the road, a stone-faced Devon bank, again 1.4 high with planting on top. So on the road, because it's a bit more formal there, and to tie in with the existing boundary treatments to the cemetery, a stone-faced Devon bank with beech planting on top. The Open Spaces Strategy Plan shows the areas of allotments, the dark corridor, which is open space but not accessible, so that's in the lighter blue. So that doesn't have public accessibility because we're retaining that as dark corridor. The darker blue being having public access into the orchard, rain garden area. And then to the south, we have the, in the pinky colour, children's play, attenuation basin, and then the retained woodland in the green, which has public access. And then retained woodland in grey here with no public access. The have details of the LEAP, the locally equipped area for play. So this is by the on the southern part of open space. So we have the detail of all the equipment going there. That is fenced around and has all the necessary safety matting and required number of pieces of play equipment, along with benches and bins, etc., to meet the requirements of the open space specialist. And I just also wanted to show you some plans. As I was asked on site about lighting and light spill, and I said I had some plans which showed that how this had been modelled to ensure those dark corridors remain dark. So again, I'm going to zoom in on this. So, for instance, this is the entrance to the site, the terrace of dwellings, and then the semis. So this is the light modelling based on it being nighttime, all curtains open, the light fittings proposed to go inside the dwellings in terms of what that light spill is onto the edge, outside of the dwellings. And what this demonstrates is that none of that light spills beyond the boundaries of the dwellings or into the dark corridors. So that shows the light spill. It hasn't been modelled for the very centre of the site for the very purpose of it's just unnecessary to do so because of the it's not next to any of the dark corridors. So we have the modelling to show the light spill, and then that's also shown on these plans here, where the areas of red is basically any area which is over 0.5 lux, which is the maximum amount of light allowed into the dark corridors. And as you can see from this, none of those areas of light spill extend into any of the dark corridors. So all light sort of contained within the site. Where we have properties which have boundaries facing the dark corridor, there are no windows in those side properties, in those side elevations. And this demonstrates that the light will be contained within the site and not into those areas which are required under the Habitats Regulations Assessment to remain at less than 0.5 lux. Lighting at the entrance to the site. Now, the access to the site was approved as part of the outline. Because it involves a right turn lane, it is necessary to have street lighting at the point of the access for highway safety reasons. So we're looking at 3 lampposts with luminaires which are specially designed to be as bat friendly or appropriate in the area for bats in terms of the colour. Now these do have an area of light spill which does go beyond the it will spill a little bit beyond the road, and these are shown here. But that is being put forward to Natural England in terms of their requirements in terms of keeping these corridors dark, and it was accepted as outlined that this area would need to be lit in terms of street lighting, but there is no street lighting within the development proposed at all. So that shows the area of light spill from those luminaires. What this plan doesn't take into account is the proposed tree planting along the front and proposed hedge banks. So this is just treating it as if it were a flat site with no trees. But in this one, there are trees proposed on the inside of that Devon bank and along the frontage of the allotments. In part of the Habitats Regulations Assessment, there's a need to keep these corridors dark with future monitoring as well. This plan showing where those corridors are and the light monitoring points in the future. So the orange dots being the points where in the future there has to be continued monitoring to ensure that these are functioning as designed. Additional hedge planting in areas on the other boundary where there are gaps at the moment to stop spill, for instance, from the school or spill here from any potential users of the pathway along this point here. And also as part of the LEMP, the submitted Landscape Ecology Management Plan, we have details of the reptile sort of log piles and homes, and is it hypercula here and here, details of hedgehog passes through boundary fences and how these areas are kept dark. Part of the outline, there was a condition requiring a solar orientation plan to be submitted, this showing all properties which have got optimised for solar potential, so for solar panels and for solar gain in terms of windows. This helps explain some of the choices being made in terms of the layout, in terms of trying to yet as many south-facing properties as possible. So anything with a green line is within 30 degrees of south. Anything with an orange line are elevations within within 45 degrees of due south. So this indicating where those elevations are, which are being optimised for solar gain. And as I mentioned, there was solar panels proposed, where this is an example of the panels which have been put on another development by the same developer at Dartmouth, where these panels are recessed into slate roofs, and I'm proposing a condition to require details of the same to make sure that where solar panels are used, they are recessed so they're flush with the roof rather than sat on top of the roof. But that's an example of how it was achieved on a slate roof, natural slate roof in Dartmouth. And a few photos of the site, just to take members through who weren't on the site visit, looking up to the access point here. So stood at the access point looking across. For those on the site visit, I might remember my orange cone showing the position of the end of the terrace. So that is here, those two orange cones there and there. And then from within the site, so looking back towards the church, you see that area of lower ground I mentioned previously where elements of fill would happen. These are areas where partial cuts would take place. This is stood on that main road route running through the site. So church at one end, looking through Yarna Beacon at the other end, and that's part of the design has been purposefully tried to keep that straight line between the two to retain viewpoints of both the church tower and the beacon. And stood up on the higher part of the site, looking back towards the entrance. So school here, church here. Looking down towards the proposed area for the attenuation basin. So Broome Park is behind us. Looking back towards the church here. And then this is stood looking towards Week. So this is looking in a westerly direction. So on the site visit, I think we stood about here, a bit further on. But that's that view towards Week and the western boundary. Stood on that. Now we've got Week off to the left-hand side here, and you can see the development at Broome Park up here. When I showed you a cross-section through the two-storey house in Broome Park, that's that two-storey house, and this is where those three houses, plots 47 to 49, would be located. And then looking down the line of the telegraph wires towards the attenuation basin. So stood on the telegraph wires, looking back up towards Broome Park. Those are the bungalows, part of Broome Park again. Showed you the cross-section through those and the dwellings. And then within that woodland area itself, this is giving an indication of what it looks like at the moment, because we didn't venture into the woodland. But you see, it's a relatively new woodland, about 10 to 15 years old. You see the tree guards are still in place, although they've grown away from them. And this being the area of land where that attenuation basin would be located. You can just see the telegraph, the wires here. And then another photo. So this is stood on the site of the allotments, looking back towards Yarna Beacon. So we have the school off here, the end of the terrace here. So that stood from within that allotments. Looking back across the site, you say there is an element of fill to happen in this lower portion of the site here, which, again, looking towards the school. So some cut up here, some fill here, and then some more cut here to basically have a sort of more level route through. And now I'll just take you back to this overall plan or 3D visual from looking from above the school, looking back towards Broome Park, in terms of what that layout would look like. This being the attenuation basin here, and play area here, an entrance here. So there's a lot of slides to go through. I do have another 50 odd views of elevations of each individual dwelling, which I'm happy to show members if they want to see any particular dwellings on there with measurements on. But I'll hold those back for questions if that's okay with members. The application as I say, is one where we're looking at the reserved matters. So we're looking at the appearance of the dwellings, we're looking at the landscaping of the site, we're looking at the layout of the dwellings and open space, and the scale, and that's the scale of the dwellings themselves, not the overall amount of development. Because outline permission has been granted for 80 dwellings on this allocated site, which was allocated for 80 dwellings. We have a reserved matters application where all the specialist consultees have come back and have no objections to the proposals. We've made tweaks and amendments in places where there were further questions from consultees, to the point where we have a good quality development which has a mix of house types, provides 24 affordable units in accordance with the 106, provides way over the odds in terms of the amount of open space required under the plan, achieves its biodiversity net gain requirements. It manages to deal with drainage at Greenfield plus climate change runoff rates through an attenuation basin, and also secures the woodland management plan, so the enhancements of the area of woodland to the south of the site, while maintaining dark corridors around for the Greater Horseshoe Bats and keeping strategic views of the church, heritage listed asset, the listed church heritage asset, and views across to Yarna Beacon. So I'm going to conclude my presentation there, but I'm happy to answer members' questions, and if members want to see any particular elevations or any properties, I'm happy to show those as well. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kitchen. Ms. Houselander, did you just want to come in there?
Just wanted to say it might be helpful as members are being asked to consider appearance, that maybe just an example of elevation treatment might be worth members seeing that, whether that's after you've had some questions, or I do feel that's one of the aspects that you're being asked to consider, so it's worth some images being presented to you.
Yeah, a few images of a few of the houses so that members can see that.
Yeah.
I think that would be helpful. Members, any questions for Mr. Kitchen? Councillor Hodgson.
Notwithstanding Ms Houselander's offer to show some elevations, which might be appropriate now as well to give more substance to it, I actually would like to propose deferral, because I think there's a lot of unanswered questions which I will happily go through, but maybe it'd be better to take Ms Houselander's offer of elevations as well, just to kind of further inform what's going on. Thank you.
Okay, well, let's have a look at a few of those elevations. Then what we will do is, I've got a proposal for deferral, which I think is the appropriate time if we're going to do it would be now. That would obviously have to be seconded and then we'd vote on that. But let's have a look at a few of the elevations now so members can see. As Ms Houselander says, this is a reserve matter, so the appearance, design is all important. Mr. Kitchen, if you could just talk us through these, that'd be great. Thank you.
All right, there's 57 different slides here. I shall take some select few. I'll go through them all, but I won't speak about each one. So this is an example of a one-bed maisonette. So this is like a property with a ground floor entrance for a one-bed maisonette, end of terrace here, and then with a second door. Sorry, that's the door. I think goes up to the first floor one, and the second door to the ground floor maisonette. And that's the internal layout of that. I should have mentioned all house types meet the minimum standards in spaces, and the garden sizes as well meet the required spaces. And then we have a slightly different design of the same thing in terms of a maisonette. So this is the freestanding two one-bed maisonettes here. Example of one of the in terms of terrace dwellings, so 2-bed terrace, with render, or if it was an end terrace, render or stone. 3-bed, I believe this is also within the terrace. I think that 4-bed is also potentially a terrace dwelling as well. And then some of the bungalows, so the single-storey dwellings on the site. Some of the 1.5-storey dwellings on the site. These are the ones which can include some of the dark stained timber cladding.
Mr. Kitchen, could I just stop you there? I'm just on the fenestration there. Am I right in saying that there are crossbars on the windows there? They're not just full big panes, but they've actually got smaller panes within them. Is that right? Okay. Yeah. So there's.
Yeah. So those
of course, yeah,
are showing a crossbar that you will see. I think in terms of the conditions. There's some sort of level of detail in terms of exactly how those precisely are going to look. Is a part of the condition 2F for Foxtrot. So the cross-section design appearance, thresholds, profiled reveals, surrounds, materials, finish of all doors and windows, including method of opening and proposed finish, lintels and sills. So that precise level of detail to be secured by condition. Sorry, I've managed to.
No, thank Councillor
Stop
Foster.
sharing.
Did you?
Yeah, I was just asking what the roofs are basically going to be, and also the render. Have you got a variation on the render on these houses?
Bear with me a second. Sorry, bear with me a second. The that program's just crashed. I just reopened the.
While Mr. Kitchen is doing that, you've seen a rough example of some of the details of that. Councillor Hodgson's proposed a deferral. Do you just want to expand on that and why you feel that a deferral's in if you could?
Thank you. Yeah. Members who attended the site meeting on Monday will be aware, and perhaps also recall from the previous outline application for this site, that there is deep concern from the public and the parish council regarding the proposed development, and indeed the site at Sawmills Fields, which we also viewed. Dartington is a rural parish, but this application for 80 houses and the next application on today's agenda for another 40 houses at Sawmills Field, a few minutes walk away, are for more dense housing that is likely to tip the balance away from a previously delightful rural parish, long considered a gem in the South Hams, to become just another boring urbanised area, detracting completely from the extraordinary heritage and historic area of Dartington. With reference to our own joint local plan supplementary planning document, which we only agreed last year, there's a reference to Dev 20, which is the place shaping and the quality of the built environment. SPD, which for the public stands for Supplementary Planning Document, point 6.4, I quote, seeks good quality design as an integral part of sustainable development. It is about creating places, buildings and spaces that work well for everyone, look good, last well and adapt to the needs of future generations. 6.6, a key theme for the local planning authorities is the climate change emergency. This will need to be reflected in all aspects of a proposed development's design. 6.7, good, which is existing context and character. Good design starts from an understanding of the place, the local and historic context and the site. Development proposals should be informed by a thorough analysis and appraisal of the physical and policy context and character of the area, as well as the specific conditions of the site. This analysis should be summarised and the opportunities and constraints identified for pre-application discussion and to support planning application submissions. Placemaking 6.8. New development should function well and create a positive sense of place, while in some places particularly those with an important historic environment. Development should enhance the existing character of the site and local area. It should seek to raise the standard of design in other areas that have a relatively poor image and character, rather than replicating existing low-quality design. This may include incorporating existing positive design site features into a new development to provide continuity and create a sense of maturity, responding to the character of the local area in terms of design, architecture, landscape, and public realm, and incorporating views and areas of historic interest. Design Code 6.11. Design codes will be sought for key development sites, including sites in sensitive historic contexts, with reference to the government's National Model Design Code. These will be expected to provide specific and detailed development parameters. The graphic and written components of design codes should build upon a design vision, such as a master plan or other design and development framework for a site or area. And finally, sorry, I won't keep going too long. Design Review Panels 6.12. It may be useful for prominent and strategically important schemes of all scales to be considered at an independent bespoke design panel review, which can provide objective assessment of proposals and add value at all stages of the development management process. Recommendations from design review panels are a material consideration in the determination of planning applications. And design review panels covering the plan area include, and then the SPD lists 4 key design panel options. So these are important outstanding matters that I put to you that should not be ignored for this important site. There's no mention in the documents for a national design guide in these proposals. There's no heritage assessment or review of this application by our own officers. As many of you may have read from Dr. Hilary Wyatt's email to us all yesterday, this is a heritage professional who has considerable concerns about the pre-application process, and that the heritage assessment that's raised as part of the outline planning has been removed from our planning portal. What's going on? There are a number of historic listed buildings and ancient hamlets and important views that should be considered and protected as part of this application. Dartington Neighbourhood Plan currently has a very skilled team assessing and documenting this historic heritage of the parish. This application will undermine much of the value of the parish. There's a problem with flooding. We heard that Sawmills Field site that we heard at the Sawmills Field site visit that the Attenuation Pond there would be built under the parking areas. But at Broome Park, this is to be an additional development requiring the removal of a wooded area. I've checked the DCC environment maps and have found that, contrary to what we were told at the site visit on Monday, which has been slightly changed today, that the trees intended to be removed to allow for the attenuation pond to be created, we were told were just a few years old. They are in fact clearly visible on aerial photographs since 2010. And removal of those willow trees, none of which are mentioned in the case officer report, will be the removal of natural flood prevention and exposed buildings, including 3 primary schools and special needs schools adjacent to the southeast of the site, to potential flooding. Any new trees to be planted will take another 12 to 15 years to be effective back to the current situation, let alone any overflow from the new development. Concerns have been raised by various members of the public that the proposed attenuation pond will not be adequate for additional hard surfacing area it will be required to provide drainage for. And as we know, there is also concern raised about the safety of the proximity of this attenuation pond to the child play area. Proper flood modelling for the catchment is urgently required. This flooding area is already at breaking point, and members might recall that we refused an application for a new school building just metres away from this site at the corner of Shinners Bridge because of flood risk, and the Environment Agency officer was adamant about it. If there is not an increased problem with this number of new buildings and impervious areas, then we should be able to vote with confidence through flood modelling. To quote Dr. Hilary Wyatt's correspondence of yesterday evening, all 3 proposals, this includes the one that was refused, received pre-application advice from South Hams District Council. And I'm quoting her, "In my experience, this process is normally intended to advise applicants how their proposals might be improved and usually includes design advice. Furthermore, major applications are usually subject to an independent design review panel. Again, this process is a standard arrangement designed to provide impartial feedback, and the outcome should be a material consideration in determining an application. However, this process does not seem to have been undertaken for any of these 3 Dartington applications." And it says, you may be aware that in the interest of improving transparency in decision making, some LPAs are choosing to publish pre-application advice and the outcomes of architectural review panels once a planning application is registered. It seems to me that as a pre-application advice is a paid-for service, this arrangement would give residents and council taxpayers a measure of certainty about the impartiality and quality of advice being issued to potential applicants, while guaranteeing developers a measure of confidentiality in early-stage discussions. In this case, constructive design discussion with the applicants can produce an amended scheme which makes a genuinely positive contribution to the parish. I ask, therefore, that we defer this application for a proper review, and we require Baker Estates to commission an independent design and review panel, as cited in our JLP SPD, to properly review this application, and that we require a catchment flood management modelling to actually show what the flood modelling might look like with this included, because I think we are flying blind at the moment. So therefore I propose to you that we defer this application for those things to be put in place.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Mr. Kitchen, just on the heritage aspect of the points that Councillor Hodgson raised, could you just give us a bit more detail on that? Well, in particular, the response, basically, that our heritage officers have had.
Yeah, so as part of the outline, the Heritage Officer made comments on the outline application and had no objection in terms of the impacts of the development on the setting of the church, which is just off plan here. There were suggestions in there saying, as reserve matters come forward, we need to think about how development is pushed back from the roadside edge, so it's not to compete in terms of with the church in that. So obviously that advice has been followed in terms of pushing these dwellings back 30 metres. Also talked about ensuring that there remained views of and glimpsed views of the church tower, and that's why the application involves this sort of long road through. And while I was trying to show you on my photos, if I go back to them, those views, for instance, stood on that road, looking in a straight direction towards those churches, how you'd have houses either side, but we have framed views of that and retaining the views there. I spoke with the Heritage Officer in terms of the reserved matters as the application came in. He didn't feel that it was one that he needed to comment on in any detail because of the he was happy with the proposal, and on the basis that his original conclusion was it wasn't going to adversely impact on the setting of the listed building, that he didn't intend to make any further comment on the reserved matters, and left it up to planning officers and the committee to make a final judgment on that. So in terms of the heritage impact, I believe we have a scheme here which doesn't result in any harm onto the setting of the listed building. So that was assessed as part of the outline, and one of the reasons why we wanted a parameter plan as part of that outline as well, to set some parameters in terms of where development could take place and some of those views through. So that is why my recommendation to you is one of approval now, in terms of it meets those points which were set out in the initial advice.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Hodgson?
There's more than one listed building in proximity to this site. There's the whole hamlet of Week, which is full of listed buildings. There's the listed building which is part of the school, which is right on Shinners Bridge. 30 metres setting back from the road is about the length of this room. You're not going to hide big blind gable ends. There's not even been produced a map which shows where all the listed buildings are. I actually sent some photographs across this morning that Janice has, and one of those does have the listed buildings all dotted out. Do you want to put that up? That's all right, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the points that you raised, Councillor Hodgson, are rather than for a deferral, I mean, they're obviously, you feel, you know, you would object on those grounds. I don't think they would necessarily be for deferral. But if we could just see that map on
I think the problem is, Councillor,
Sorry?
Chairman, if I may, is
Yeah.
that we're not actually looking at the whole picture. I mean, why was that Heritage Officer's report removed from the outline planning portal so that people could actually read it? Why was there no proper
Well,
actual?
Let Mr. Kitchen answer that.
Well,
Yes, I was asked the same question by Hilary White yesterday by email, which I responded to as well, to say that actually all consultation responses are removed from all applications on the web after 6 months. So because 6 months has passed since the granting of outline permission, automatically the consultation responses attached to that outline permission are all removed from the website. And that's the same for this application and every other application dealt with by the council. And I responded to Hilary White and with explanation of that yesterday afternoon.
with respect, I'm not just here to speak for Dr. Wyatt, but I'm just pointing out that, I mean, why is it we don't actually have a comment from the Heritage Officer in writing that we could actually have seen?
I think,
You know, and why?
I think Mr. Kitchen has explained that. I mean, you might not necessarily agree, but he's pointed at, he said that basically the Heritage Officer had a few concerns, but felt they could be easily mitigated, and on seeing this felt that they had. I mean, you're right. I mean, it probably would have been better if he had put something in writing. Members can come to their own conclusions, but I think the fact that he hasn't commented on it says something, in a sense. It's not that he's been, you know,
Great benefit to